The morning William discovered the empty chair outside Lewis's door, he felt something crack inside his chest. For 17 years, Marcus had sat in that same spot, weathered hands folded over his security radio, eyes scanning every shadow that dared approach the penthouse suite. Now the chair sat empty, and William's world tilted on its axis. What started as a routine security briefing would become the day William learned that loyalty meant nothing to men in expensive suits, that friendship could be discarded like yesterday's newspaper, and that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to burn everything else to the ground. This is the story of a man who thought he knew the rules of the game, until the game changed everything he believed in. William Hayes pressed the elevator button with more force than necessary, watching the numbers climb toward the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors, showing a man who had spent 15 years perfecting the art of looking calm while his mind raced. Today felt different. The morning briefing had been moved up 2 hours, and nobody moved Lewis Blackstone's schedule without a damn good reason. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the executive floor. William stepped out into the marble hallway, his footsteps echoing in the early morning silence. The familiar scent of expensive leather and fresh flowers greeted him, but something was wrong. His eyes immediately went to the chair positioned outside Lewis's office door. It was empty. William stopped walking. Marcus Delaney had occupied that chair every morning for 17 years. Rain or shine, sick or healthy, Marcus was there by 6:30 sharp, his gray hair perfectly combed, his uniform pressed, his hand never far from his radio. The man was more reliable than atomic time. William pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. A cold weight settled in his stomach as he walked toward Lewis's office door. "Mr. Hayes." The voice came from behind him. William turned to see Janet Morrison, Lewis's personal assistant, emerging from the break room with a steaming cup of coffee. Her usually perfect composure seemed strained around the edges. "Janet, where's Marcus?" She hesitated, which was unlike her. Janet Morrison had been fielding difficult questions for Lewis Blackstone for 12 years. She didn't hesitate. "Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you in his office," she said, avoiding his question entirely. William studied her face. Janet had kind eyes, the sort that belonged to someone who had raised 3 children and volunteered at animal shelters on weekends. Those eyes weren't meeting his now. "Is Marcus sick?" William pressed. "Please, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Blackstone is waiting." The office door was already open. William could see Lewis sitting behind his massive oak desk, talking quietly into his phone. The man looked like he had been carved from marble, all sharp angles and expensive suits. At 62, Lewis Blackstone commanded respect from senators and feared nothing except perhaps his own mortality. William knocked on the doorframe. Lewis looked up and waved him in, then ended his phone call. "William, close the door behind you." The office was exactly as William remembered from yesterday, everything in its proper place. Awards and photographs lined the walls, showing Lewis shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling out below them like a miniature kingdom. "You're early," Lewis said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "You moved the meeting up. Where's Marcus?" Lewis opened a file on his desk, scanning its contents with the same expression he might use to review quarterly earnings reports. "Marcus Delaney has been reassigned to our downtown facility, effective immediately." The words hit William like a physical blow. "Reassigned? What the hell does that mean?" "It means exactly what it sounds like. He'll be working security for our accounting offices on 5th Street. Different responsibilities, different schedule." William felt heat rising in his chest. "Lewis, Marcus has been guarding your door for 17 years. He saved your life twice that I know of. Why would you reassign him?" "Because I made a business decision." Lewis's voice carried the tone he used when a conversation was over. "The security landscape has evolved. We need younger, more technologically adept personnel in key positions. Marcus knows every face in this building. He can spot trouble from 3 floors away. What technology could possibly replace that kind of experience? Lewis leaned back in his chair, studying William with the calculating look of a man who had built an empire by reading people correctly. The kind that doesn't fall asleep during the night shift. The accusation hung in the air between them like smoke. William felt his hands clench into fists without his permission. Marcus doesn't sleep on duty. Last Tuesday night, security cameras caught him dozing at approximately 2:15 in the morning. Duration, roughly 12 minutes. William's mind raced back to the previous week. Tuesday had been the night Marcus's granddaughter had been rushed to the hospital with appendicitis. The man had been awake for 36 hours straight, but he had still shown up for his shift because that's who Marcus was. You know what happened that night, William said slowly. Emma was in surgery. He'd been at the hospital all day, and he chose to come to work anyway, compromising the security of this facility. Lewis closed the file with a snap. That shows poor judgment. That shows dedication. It shows a man who can't handle his personal responsibilities without affecting his professional ones. William stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. His granddaughter could have died. You knew about the situation. Hell, you sent flowers to the hospital. I also sent a replacement guard to cover his shift. He declined and insisted on working. That was his choice. The logical part of William's brain recognized the trap. Lewis had offered Marcus the night off, knowing full well that Marcus would never accept it. The old guard's sense of duty had been used against him, turned into evidence of his unfitness for the job. So you punish loyalty, William said. I reward competence. Marcus Delaney is a good man, but he's also a 70-year-old man whose reflexes have slowed and whose judgment has become clouded by sentiment. This isn't punishment. It's reality. William walked to the window, looking down at the street below. People moved like ants between the buildings, each one believing their problems mattered. Their struggles had meaning. From his height, they all looked insignificant. What aren't you telling me? William asked without turning around. I don't know what you mean. You didn't call me up here 2 hours early to discuss personnel changes. You could have sent an email. You could have had Janet tell me. Instead, you want to watch my face when you explain why you're throwing away 17 years of service. Lewis was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. There's going to be some changes around here, William. Big changes. The kind that require absolute loyalty and zero margin for error. William turned back to face him. What kind of changes? The kind that mean I need to know beyond any shadow of doubt that every person in my inner circle will follow orders without question, even when those orders don't make sense to them. The implication settled over William like a heavy blanket. This wasn't about Marcus falling asleep. This was about testing William's loyalty by making him watch a good man get destroyed. You want to see if I'll stand by while you ruin someone who doesn't deserve it. I want to see if you understand that sometimes good people get hurt for the greater good. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary. William felt something fundamental shift inside him, like a gear clicking into a different position. For 15 years, he had followed Lewis Blackstone's orders without question. He had believed in the man's vision, trusted his judgment, even when that judgment seemed harsh. But this felt different. This felt cruel. And if I don't understand? Lewis opened another file, this one much thicker than the first. William could see his own photograph clipped to the inside cover. Then, you'll understand why Marcus was just the beginning. The threat was delivered so casually that it took William a moment to process it fully. When he did, he felt his entire relationship with Lewis Blackstone reframe itself in an instant. This wasn't a mentor testing a protege. This was a predator showing his teeth. I see, William said quietly. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. I'm not sure you understand what's at stake here, or what I'm willing to do to protect it. William looked around the office one more time, taking in the awards and photographs, the expensive furniture, the view that made him feel like a king. All of it suddenly seemed hollow, like a movie set designed to impress visitors who didn't know any better. I understand more than you think, he said. Lewis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good. Then, we can move forward. I have some new assignments for you. Projects that will require your complete attention and absolute discretion. William nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. He was thinking about Marcus Delaney's granddaughter, about a 70-year-old man who had chosen duty over sleep because that's what honor looked like. He was thinking about 17 years of service being erased by 12 minutes of human weakness. Most of all, he was thinking about the fact that Lewis Blackstone had just shown him exactly what kind of man he really was. And William was beginning to understand what kind of man he was going to have to become in response. The meeting continued for another hour, with Lewis outlining new security protocols and discussing upcoming changes to the company structure. William listened and nodded and asked appropriate questions, but part of him had already left the room. Part of him was already planning. When he finally walked out of the office, Janet was still at her desk, typing with mechanical precision. She looked up as he passed, and for just a moment, their eyes met. In hers, he saw the same hollow recognition he felt in his chest. She knew what kind of man Lewis Blackstone was, too. She had probably known for years. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. William watched the numbers decrease, counting down not just floors, but something else entirely. When the doors opened in the lobby, he stepped out into a world that looked exactly the same, but felt fundamentally different. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour. Come alone. And Marcus. Somehow, the old guard had gotten William's personal number, which meant he had something important to say, something that couldn't wait for official channels. William deleted the message and walked toward the exit, his reflection following him in the polished marble. The man in the mirror looked the same as always, but William knew that appearances could be deceiving. He had just learned that lesson the hard way. Outside, the morning sun was climbing higher, burning off the last of the fog that had shrouded the city at dawn. It was going to be a clear day, the kind where you could see for miles in every direction. William found himself wondering what else he might be able to see clearly, now that the fog was lifting. The coffee shop on 5th Street was the kind of place that existed in the shadows of skyscrapers, serving overworked accountants and tired security guards who couldn't afford the gleaming establishments closer to the financial district. William found Marcus in a corner booth, his weathered hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The old guard had changed out of his uniform into civilian clothes, but somehow he still looked like he was on duty. "You came," Marcus said as William slid into the opposite seat. "You sounded like it was important." Marcus studied him for a long moment, those sharp gray eyes taking in details the way they had been trained to do for decades. "You don't look surprised to see me." "Should I be?" Most people would be surprised to get a message from someone who was supposed to be cleaning out his locker and disappearing quietly into retirement. William signaled the waitress for coffee. The shop was nearly empty, just a few early morning stragglers reading newspapers and staring at laptops. Nobody who would report back to Lewis Blackstone about this meeting. "Lewis told me you were reassigned to the downtown facility," William said. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what he called it? Reassignment? What would you call it?" "I'd call it a warning shot." The waitress brought William's coffee. It was strong and bitter, the kind that woke you up whether you wanted to be awake or not. William wrapped his hands around the mug and waited for Marcus to continue. 17 years, Marcus said quietly. 17 years I've been watching that man's back. Stopped 2 assassination attempts, 3 corporate espionage operations, and more angry investors than I can count. You know what he said to me yesterday when they escorted me out? William shook his head. He said I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve at a lower stress position. Said it would be better for my health. Marcus's voice carried the kind of controlled anger that came from decades of practice. Like I was some doddering old fool who couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. He mentioned the Tuesday night incident. Of course he did. 12 minutes. 12 minutes in 17 years. And that's what he remembers. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. You want to know what I remember about Tuesday night? William nodded. I remember the phone call that came in at 11:47. Private line, the one that bypasses Janet and goes straight to Lewis's office. I remember him taking it in the hallway instead of behind closed doors, which he never does. And I remember hearing him say 3 words that made my blood run cold. What words? He said the timeline accelerates. William felt the coffee turn sour in his stomach. Timeline for what? That's the question, isn't it? Marcus pulled a manila envelope from his jacket pocket, sliding it across the table. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing things. Small things at first. New faces in the building, people with credentials I couldn't verify. Security protocols being changed without explanation. Access codes being updated on schedules that didn't make operational sense. William opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like copies of security logs. The photos showed men in expensive suits entering the building through service entrances, bypassing normal security checkpoints. Who are these people? That's why I try to find out. The tall one in the gray suit is Vincent Carrera. He runs security for Meridian's offshore operations. The problem is Meridian doesn't have offshore operations. Williams studied the photograph. Vincent Carrera looked like the kind of man who solved problems with violence first and asked questions later. His smile was too practiced, his posture too alert. At least, they didn't have offshore operations 3 months ago. Marcus continued. Now, they've got shell companies in 6 different countries, all registered in the past 90 days. All funded through accounts that trace back to Meridian, but aren't part of their official corporate structure. How do you know all this? Marcus tapped the side of his nose. 17 years of listening at doors and remembering faces. You pick things up. Plus, my nephew works in corporate accounting. He's been asking me questions about expense reports that don't make sense. William flipped through the documents. Financial records, shipping manifests, personnel files for people he'd never seen before. It painted a picture of a company within a company, a hidden operation running parallel to Meridian's legitimate business. What kind of operation needs this much secrecy? William asked. The kind that would destroy everything if it came to light. Marcus finished his coffee and signaled for the check. The kind that requires absolute loyalty and zero margin for error. The words echoed what Lewis had said earlier that morning. William felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. You think this is why they got rid of you? Because you're getting too close to something. I think they got rid of me because I'm a liability. I know too much, I ask too many questions, and I have too much history with Lewis to be easily controlled. Marcus stood up, dropping money on the table for both their coffees. But mostly, I think they got rid of me to send you a message. What kind of message? The kind that says this is what happens to people who don't fall in line. They make you watch someone you respect get destroyed, and then they ask if you understand what's expected of you. William gathered up the documents, stuffing them back into the envelope. His mind was racing, trying to process the implications of what Marcus was showing him. Why are you giving me this? He asked. Because you're the only person in that building who might be able to stop whatever's coming. You have access, you have Lewis's trust, and you're smart enough to know that good people don't usually need this much security around their business operations. They walked out of the coffee shop together, emerging into the bright morning sunlight. The city was fully awake now, traffic flowing through the streets like blood through arteries. Everything looked normal, but William was beginning to understand that normal was just a mask people wore to hide the things they didn't want others to see. There's something else, Marcus said as they reached the corner where their paths would diverge. The new guard they brought in to replace me. His name is Collins, and he's not what he appears to be. What do you mean? I mean his background check is too clean, his references are too perfect, and his security clearance level is too high for someone guarding an office door. Collins isn't there to protect Lewis from outside threats. He's there to make sure Lewis doesn't become an outside threat himself. The implication hit William like a slap. You think Lewis is being watched by his own people? I think there's a bigger game being played here, and Lewis Blackstone isn't the one calling the shots anymore. I think he's just another piece on the board, same as you and me. They shook hands, a formal gesture that somehow carried the weight of everything they couldn't say out loud. Marcus walked away without looking back, disappearing into the crowd of people heading to work in offices where they believed they understood the rules of the game they were playing. William stood on the corner for several minutes, watching the traffic flow past. The envelope felt heavy in his hands, weighted with information that could destroy careers and possibly lives. He thought about Louis Blackstone sitting in his office 42 floors above the street, making phone calls about timelines that were accelerating toward unknown destinations. His phone buzzed with a message from Janet. "Mr. Blackstone needs to see you immediately. Please return to the office." William looked up at the Meridian Tower, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun. From street level, it looked like any other corporate building, full of people working normal jobs for normal reasons. But William was beginning to understand that perspective could be deceiving. What looked solid from one angle might be hollow from another. He started walking back toward the building, the envelope tucked safely inside his jacket. With each step, he felt himself crossing a line that he hadn't even known existed an hour ago. This morning, he had been Louis Blackstone's trusted lieutenant, someone who followed orders and didn't ask inconvenient questions. Now he was something else entirely. The lobby of the Meridian Tower was busy with morning foot traffic, employees badging in for another day of work. William nodded to the security guards at the desk, men he had known for years. They smiled and waved him through, the same as always. But William found himself wondering how many of them were really what they appeared to be. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave him time to think. Marcus was right about one thing. This morning's meeting had been a test. Louis had wanted to see how William would react to watching a good man get destroyed for reasons that didn't make sense. The question was whether William had passed or failed that test. When the elevator doors opened, William saw Collins for the first time. The new guard was sitting in Marcus's chair, but the resemblance ended there. Where Marcus had been weathered and grandfatherly, Collins was sharp and predatory. He looked like he had been carved from the same marble as Louis Blackstone, all clean lines and hidden depths. "Mr. Hayes," Collins said, standing as William approached. "Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you." His voice was polite, but somehow wrong, like an actor playing a role he hadn't quite mastered yet. William nodded and walked toward Louis's office, feeling Collins's eyes tracking his movement. The door was already open. Louis was standing by the window, looking down at the city below with the expression of a man who owned everything he could see. William. Perfect timing. We have a great deal to discuss." William stepped into the office, and Collins quietly closed the door behind him. The sound of the latch engaging seemed unusually final, like the closing of a chapter in a book he had been reading without understanding the plot. "I've been thinking about our conversation this morning," Louis said without turning around, "about loyalty and sacrifice and the price of progress." "Have you?" "Indeed. And I've come to the conclusion that you're ready for the next phase of your career. A promotion, if you will." Louis turned away from the window, and William saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It might have been respect, or it might have been something much more dangerous. "What kind of promotion?" "The kind that comes with new responsibilities and new privileges. The kind that requires you to see the bigger picture, even when parts of that picture might be difficult to accept." Louis walked to his desk and opened a new file, thicker than the others. Inside, William could see maps, financial documents, and what looked like operational timelines. "Tell me, William, what do you know about international security consulting?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but William had learned to recognize when Louis was testing him again. Every question was a trap, every answer a commitment to something he didn't fully understand yet. "I know it's a growing field. Companies need protection for their global operations." "Exactly. And sometimes that protection requires actions that might seem questionable to people who don't understand the stakes involved." Louis spread several photographs across his desk. They showed warehouses, shipping containers, and men with military bearings standing guard over operations that looked anything but corporate. "What you're looking at is the future of Meridian Corporation. A future where we don't just provide security consulting. We provide comprehensive solutions to complex international problems." Williams studied the photographs, feeling pieces of Marcus's puzzle clicking into place. The shell companies, the offshore operations, the new faces in the building. It was all part of something much larger than he had imagined. What kind of problems? The kind that governments can't solve through official channels. The kind that require private contractors with flexible moral frameworks and no public accountability. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun that had just been fired. William understood now why Marcus had been removed, why Collins had been brought in, why loyalty was being tested through the destruction of good men. Lewis Blackstone wasn't just running a security company anymore. He was building something much more dangerous, something that existed in the spaces between laws and operated according to rules that normal people were never meant to understand. And my role in this future? Lewis smiled, and this time it did reach his eyes. But instead of warmth, it carried the cold satisfaction of a predator who had successfully cornered his prey. Your role, my dear William, is to help me make sure that future arrives on schedule. That evening, William sat in his apartment staring at the documents Marcus had given him. Spread across his coffee table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, they told a story that made his stomach turn. Shipping manifests for cargo that didn't exist. Financial transfers to accounts in countries where questions weren't asked. Personnel files for men whose backgrounds read like military fiction. His apartment had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the corporate world and remember who he was before Lewis Blackstone had shaped him into something else. Tonight, even that comfort felt hollow. The walls seemed to press in around him, heavy with the weight of what he now knew. William's phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed his sister's name. Hey, Sarah, you sound terrible. Long day at the office. If only she knew. Something like that. How are the kids? They're good. Emma's at a science project due next week, and she's been asking if Uncle William could help her with it. Something about security systems. Under normal circumstances, William would have smiled at that. His 8-year-old niece had developed a fascination with his work, though she understood it only in the most innocent terms. She thought he was like a superhero, protecting important people from bad guys. The simplicity of her worldview had always been refreshing. Tonight, it felt like a knife in his chest. I might be tied up with work for a while, he said carefully. Big project coming up. The kind of project that requires you to sound like someone died. Sarah had always been able to read him too well. It was both a blessing and a curse having someone who could see through the professional facade he wore like armor. Just complicated corporate stuff. Nothing interesting. Okay, but you know you can talk to me, right? I mean, I know I don't understand the business world, but I understand you. And you sound scared. Scared. The word hung in the air after Sarah ended the call, echoing in the quiet of his apartment. William had been many things over the years. Angry, frustrated, even betrayed. But scared of something new. Scared was what happened when you realized you were standing at the edge of a cliff and couldn't see the bottom. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, Marcus Delaney was probably sitting in his own apartment, wondering if he had done the right thing by reaching out to William. Somewhere else, Lewis Blackstone was making phone calls about timelines and offshore operations and the kind of problems that required private contractors with flexible moral frameworks. William's reflection stared back at him from the window, a man he was beginning not to recognize. For 15 years, he had believed he was one of the good guys, protecting legitimate business interests from legitimate threats. Now, he was learning that the line between protection and predation was thinner than he had ever imagined. His laptop chimed with an email notification. The message was from an address he didn't recognize, but the subject line made his blood run cold. Regarding Mr. Delaney's concerns. William opened the email with trembling fingers. Mr. Hayes, we are aware of your meeting with Marcus Delaney this morning. We are also aware of the materials he provided to you. While we appreciate your dedication to Mr. Blackstone's interests, we feel it necessary to clarify certain aspects of the current situation. Please join us at the address below at 11 p.m. tonight. Come alone and bring the materials Mr. Delaney gave you. This is not a request. The email wasn't signed, but it included an address in the warehouse district, the kind of place where conversations happened that were never meant to be recorded or remembered. William stared at the screen, feeling the last pieces of his old life crumbling away. They had been watching him. They knew about his meeting with Marcus, knew about the documents, probably knew about every breath he had taken since leaving Lewis's office that morning. The smart thing would be to delete the email, destroy the documents, and pretend this conversation had never happened. The smart thing would be to show up at work tomorrow morning and follow orders like a good soldier. The smart thing would be to remember that he had a comfortable life, a secure job, and a future that was already mapped out for him. But William found that he couldn't do the smart thing. Maybe he was thinking about his niece's science project, about the way she looked at him like he was someone worth admiring. Maybe it was remembering Marcus Delaney's weathered hands and 17 years of loyal service. Maybe it was just that he was tired of being scared of people he had once trusted. He gathered up the documents and put them back in the envelope. Then he got dressed, choosing clothes that would blend in with the shadows of the warehouse district. Dark jeans, black jacket, shoes that wouldn't make noise on concrete floors. The drive across the city gave him time to think about the choices that had led him to this moment. 15 years ago, he had been a young security professional with a strong moral compass and an unshakable belief in doing the right thing. Lewis Blackstone had offered him a job that seemed to align perfectly with those values. Protect good people from bad people. Simple, clean, righteous. The warehouse district at night was a different world, all shadows and empty streets and the kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat. William found the address from the email, a nondescript building that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The parking lot was empty except for two black sedans that screamed government agency. William parked and sat in his car for a moment, studying the building. No lights were visible, but that didn't mean anything. The kind of people who sent emails like the one he had received were comfortable operating in darkness. His phone buzzed with a text message, building in trance. Second door from the left. William got out of his car and walked toward the building, feeling exposed under the pale glow of the streetlights. The second door from the left was unlocked. He pushed it open and stepped into darkness that smelled of oil and metal and things that had been left to decay. "Mr. Hayes." The voice came from somewhere ahead of him, calm and professional. A light clicked on, illuminating a small office space that had been set up in what used to be the warehouse foreman station. Two men in dark suits sat behind a folding table, looking like they had been waiting for him for hours. "Please, have a seat," said the older of the two men. He was perhaps 55, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested military background. "My name is Director Chun. This is Agent Morrison. We represent certain government interests that have become concerned about recent developments at Meridian Corporation." William sat in the folding chair across from them, still clutching the envelope of documents. The setup felt like an interrogation, which he supposed it probably was. "Government interests," he repeated. "The kind that prefer to remain unnamed and unacknowledged," Chin said smoothly. "The kind that have been monitoring Mr. Blackstone's activities for some time now." Agent Morrison opened a laptop and turned it toward William. The screen showed surveillance photographs of the warehouse operations Marcus had documented, but these images were clearer, more detailed, obviously taken by professional equipment. "What you're looking at is evidence of a private military operation being conducted under the cover of Meridian Corporation's legitimate business activities," Morrison said. His voice was younger than Chin's, but carried the same professional detachment. "Mr. Blackstone has been recruiting former military personnel and private contractors for operations that fall well outside the bounds of legal security consulting." Williams studied the photographs. He could see weapons caches, training facilities, and men who looked like they had seen combat in places the public was never meant to know about. "What kind of operations?" "The kind that destabilize governments and create markets for the services Mr. Blackstone is selling," Chin replied. "The kind that have already resulted in civilian casualties in 3 different countries." The words hit William like physical blows. Civilian casualties. People were dying because of whatever Lewis was building. Innocent people who had the misfortune of being in the wrong place when private armies decided to reshape the world according to corporate interests. "Why are you telling me this?" William asked. "Because we need someone on the inside," Morrison said. "Someone with access to Mr. Blackstone's operations and the intelligence to understand what he's really planning. Chen leaned forward, his eyes fixed on William's face. We know about your meeting with Marcus Delaney this morning. We know about the documents he gave you. Most importantly, we know that you're one of the few people in that organization who still has a functioning moral compass. How do you know that? Because if you were like the others, you would have reported Mr. Delaney's contact to Mr. Blackstone immediately. Instead, you're sitting here trying to figure out how to do the right thing. William looked down at the envelope in his hands. The documents that had seemed so damning a few hours ago now felt like children's toys compared to what these men were showing him. What do you want me to do? We want you to go back to work tomorrow and act like nothing has changed, Chen said. We want you to accept whatever promotion or new responsibilities Mr. Blackstone offers you. And we want you to document everything you see and hear. You want me to be a spy. We want you to be a patriot, Morrison corrected. Mr. Blackstone's operations represent a clear and present danger to American interests and international stability. What he's building isn't security consulting. It's a private army that answers to no government and follows no laws. Chen reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a button. This is a recording device, nearly undetectable and capable of storing hundreds of hours of audio. We need you to gather evidence of Mr. Blackstone's activities, evidence that can be used to shut down his operations before they expand any further. William took the device, feeling its weight in his palm. It was surprisingly heavy for something so small, weighted with the gravity of what it represented. What about the other people at Meridian? The ones who don't know what they're really working for? They'll be protected, Chen assured him. Our interest is in the operational leadership and the private military personnel. The administrative staff and legitimate security employees have nothing to fear from this investigation. And if I refuse? The two men exchanged glances, and William saw something pass between them that made his stomach clench. Let's just say that refusal isn't really an option at this point, Morrison said quietly. You've seen too much, know too much. The only question is whether you're going to help us stop this thing or whether you're going to be classified as part of the problem. The threat was delivered with the same professional courtesy they had shown throughout the conversation, but William heard it clearly. He was no longer a free agent in this situation. His choices had narrowed to cooperation or consequences he probably didn't want to contemplate. I'll need guarantees, William said slowly. Protection for Marcus Delaney. Protection for the innocent employees. And I want to know exactly what you're planning to do with the evidence I gather. Agreed, Chun said immediately. Mr. Delaney is already under our protection, though he doesn't know it. As for the evidence, it will be used to build a case that dismantles Mr. Blackstone's operations without unnecessary collateral damage. William slipped the recording device into his pocket. It felt like swallowing poison, accepting this role as betrayer and patriot all at once. There's something else you should know, Morrison said as they prepared to leave. The timeline Mr. Blackstone mentioned to Mr. Delaney, the acceleration of plans. We believe it's connected to an operation scheduled for next month. Something big enough that they're willing to eliminate anyone who might interfere with it. Eliminate? Chen's expression grew grim. Mr. Delaney wasn't the first person to ask inconvenient questions about Meridian's activities. But he was the first one important enough to you that Mr. Blackstone thought he could use his removal as a loyalty test. The implication settled over William like a shroud. Other people had been asking questions, and those people were no longer asking anything at all. We'll be in touch, Chen said, standing up from the table. Remember, tomorrow morning you go back to being Louis Blackstone's trusted lieutenant. Your life may depend on how convincingly you play that role. William walked back to his car in silence, feeling the recording device burning like a coal in his pocket. The warehouse district looked different now, less empty and more full of shadows that might contain government watchers and corporate assassins and the ghosts of people who had asked the wrong questions at the wrong time. The drive home gave him time to process what had just happened. In the space of a single day, he had learned that his mentor was a war criminal, that his company was a front for illegal military operations, and that he was now working for the federal government whether he wanted to or not. Most of all, He had learned that the comfortable life he had built over 15 years had been balanced on a foundation of lies and blood that he had been too naive or too willful to see. As he pulled into his apartment building's parking garage, William caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at him was someone he was beginning to recognize, someone who had finally stopped believing in simple truths and easy answers. Tomorrow, he would put on his suit and tie and go back to work for Lewis Blackstone. He would smile and nod and follow orders like the loyal employee he had always been. But underneath it all, he would be someone else entirely, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to serve justice was to betray everything you had once believed in. The recording device seemed to pulse against his leg as he walked to the elevator, keeping time with his heartbeat like a mechanical conscience that would remind him with every step exactly what kind of man he was becoming. William arrived at the Meridian Tower the next morning exactly 37 minutes early, the same as he had every day for the past 15 years. The recording device was secure in his jacket pocket, positioned where the microphone would pick up conversations clearly, but remain invisible to casual observation. He had practiced in his apartment mirror until his movements seemed natural, until no one could tell he was carrying anything more dangerous than loose change. Collins was already at his post outside Lewis's office, looking like he had been there all night. The man's posture was too perfect, his attention too focused. Everything about him screamed professional soldier rather than corporate security guard. "Morning, Collins," Williams said, testing the waters. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Blackstone asked me to tell you he'll see you at 9 sharp. Collins's voice was polite, but distant, like a recording of politeness rather than the real thing. William nodded and walked to his own office, fighting the urge to look back. He could feel the man's eyes tracking his movement, cataloging details, filing away information about William's demeanor and behavior for someone's report. William's office had always been his operational command center, the place where he coordinated security for Lewis's empire. This morning, it felt like enemy territory. Every phone call could be monitored, every computer keystroke could be tracked, every conversation could be the one that revealed his new allegiance to people who wanted to see Lewis Blackstone destroyed. At exactly 9 o'clock, William knocked on Lewis's door. The man was waiting for him with 2 cups of coffee and the satisfied expression of someone who had slept while knowing his plans were proceeding smoothly. "William, perfect timing. Please sit. We have quite a bit to cover today." William activated the recording device with a subtle movement as he settled into the leather chair across from Lewis's desk. The technology was impressive, Director Chun had assured him. It would capture everything within a 15-foot radius with crystal clarity. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Lewis said, stirring sugar into his coffee with mechanical precision. "About your promotion and the new responsibilities it will entail. I'm honored by your confidence in me. Confidence that is well-earned, I assure you. 15 years of loyal service doesn't go unnoticed." Lewis opened a file on his desk, revealing maps of what looked like Central American countries. "Tell me, William, what do you know about the political situation in Honduras?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but William had learned to roll with Lewis's conversational curveballs. Unstable government, significant poverty, problems with organized crime. Why? Because instability creates opportunity, and opportunity, properly managed, creates profit. Lewis traced a finger along what appeared to be shipping routes marked on the map. The Honduran government has been struggling to maintain control of their ports. Drug cartels, political corruption, general incompetence. It's become a problem for legitimate businesses trying to operate in the region. William felt the recording device warming against his chest, capturing every word. "And Meridian has business interests there?" "We will. A consortium of American companies has approached us about providing comprehensive security solutions for their operations. The kind of solutions that go beyond traditional corporate protection." Lewis pulled out photographs that made William's stomach clench. They showed what looked like military encampments, complete with weapons depots and training facilities. Men in unmarked uniforms were conducting exercises that looked more like preparation for war than corporate security training. The problem with traditional security consulting, Lewis continued, is that it's reactive. You wait for threats to emerge, then you respond. But what if you could be proactive? What if you could shape the environment to eliminate threats before they develop? Shape the environment how? Lewis's smile carried the cold satisfaction of a chess master explaining a winning strategy. By ensuring that the right people are in positions of power. By making certain that local authorities understand the benefits of cooperation with American business interests. By demonstrating that resistance to such cooperation can be costly. The implications were staggering. Lewis wasn't talking about security consulting. He was talking about regime change, about using private military forces to destabilize governments and install puppet leaders who would be friendly to corporate interests. That sounds like something that would attract government attention, William said carefully. Only if the government knew about it. And only if the government disapproved. Lewis leaned back in his chair, studying William's reaction. You'd be surprised how many people in Washington understand the necessity of unconventional solutions to complex international problems. William felt pieces clicking into place. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the military contractors. Lewis wasn't just building a private army. He was building a private army with official sanction, or at least official tolerance. What will my role be in something like this? Coordination, liaison work, making sure our field operations have the intelligence and logistical support they need to achieve their objectives. Lewis pulled out another set of documents, these ones bearing official-looking seals and signatures. You'd be working directly with our operational commanders, men like Vincent Carrera. The name sent a chill through William. Vincent Carrera, the man Marcus had photographed entering the building through service entrances. The man who looked like he solved problems with violence first and asked questions later. When would this begin? Sooner than you might think. The Honduras operation launches in 3 weeks. Vincent's team is already in position, but they need someone they can trust to coordinate with our stateside operations. 3 weeks. The timeline Director Chun had mentioned was even more compressed than he had realized. Whatever Lewis was planning, it was about to become reality. I need more details about the operation, Williams said. Security protocols, communication procedures, contingency planning. Of course, Vincent is flying in tomorrow to brief you personally. You'll find him quite impressive. Former Special Forces, extensive experience in Latin America, absolutely no qualms about doing whatever needs to be done. Lewis stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city with the expression of a man who saw the world as his personal chessboard. There's something else, William. Something I need you to understand about the nature of what we're building here. What's that? We're not just changing the security consulting business. We're changing the way power works in the modern world. Governments are slow, inefficient, constrained by laws and public opinion and the messy realities of democratic process. But corporations, properly organized and sufficiently resourced, can act decisively to protect their interests. Lewis turned back to face him, and William saw something in his eyes that was both thrilling and terrifying. It was the look of a true believer, someone who had convinced himself that his vision was not just profitable, but righteous. What we're creating is a new model of governance, corporate governance, unencumbered by the limitations of traditional political structures. A system where decisions are made by people who understand the realities of global commerce, not by politicians who pander to voters who don't understand the complexities of the modern world. William felt his mouth go dry. This wasn't just about military operations or destabilizing governments. This was about replacing governments entirely, about creating a world where corporations wielded the kind of power that had once belonged exclusively to sovereign nations. That's quite a vision, William managed. It's the future, William. The question is whether you want to be part of building that future or part of the old system that's going to be swept aside by it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Collins stepped in without waiting for permission, moving with the fluid precision of someone accustomed to potentially violent situations. Mr. Blackstone, Vincent Carrera is here for his 11 o'clock meeting. Excellent. Send him in. William felt his pulse quicken. He was about to meet the man who commanded Lewis's private army, the person responsible for whatever civilian casualties Director Chun had mentioned. The recording device seemed to burn against his chest as he prepared to face someone who might be a war criminal. Vincent Carrera entered the office like he owned it, all confidence and controlled aggression. He was exactly as he had appeared in Marcus's photographs, but seeing him in person revealed details that pictures couldn't capture. The way he moved suggested someone comfortable with violence. The way he looked at William suggested someone comfortable with making life and death decisions about people he had just met. "Vincent, I'd like you to meet William Hayes, your new coordination partner." Carrera extended his hand, and William shook it, feeling strength that could crush bones without effort. "Mr. Hayes, Lewis has told me great things about you." Likewise, William lied. "Vincent has been overseeing our advance operations in Honduras," Lewis explained. "William will be your primary contact for stateside coordination and logistical support." Carrera studied William with eyes that seemed to see too much. "What's your background, Hayes? Military? Intelligence? Corporate security?" 15 years with Meridian. "Corporate," Carrera repeated, like the word left a bad taste in his mouth. "Well, you'll learn fast or you won't last long. What we're doing down there isn't corporate anything. It's war, just undeclared and unacknowledged." Lewis gestured for both men to sit. "Vincent, why don't you give William an overview of the current operational status?" Carrera opened a briefcase and spread maps across Lewis's desk. They showed the Honduran coast in detail, with various locations marked in red and blue symbols that looked like military target designations. "We have 3 teams in place," Carrera began, his voice carrying the clipped precision of a military briefing. "Alpha Team is positioned near Puerto Cortez, monitoring port security and identifying key personnel who need to be neutralized or recruited. Beta Team is in Tegucigalpa, developing intelligence on government officials and their vulnerabilities. Charlie Team is mobile, ready to provide support wherever it's needed." William felt sick as he listened to Carrera describe what amounted to a military occupation disguised as security consulting. The recording device was capturing every word, building a case that would destroy lives and careers, but might also prevent something much worse from happening. "What about local resistance?" William asked. Carrera's smile was cold as winter. "There won't be any. We've identified the key players who might organize opposition, and they're being dealt with accordingly. Some through financial incentives, others through more direct methods." "Direct methods?" "Let's just say that people who threaten American business interests in our area of operation have a tendency to suffer unfortunate accidents." The casual way Carrera discussed murder made William's skin crawl. These weren't soldiers fighting a legitimate war. They were assassins working for corporate profit, killing anyone who stood in the way of Lewis Blackstone's vision of the future. "The beauty of the operation," Lewis interjected, "is that when it's complete, everyone will assume the changes happened naturally. Political instability, economic pressure, the normal chaos of developing nations. No one will suspect that American corporations had any hand in reshaping the local power structure. Carrera nadie de provingli. By the time we're finished, Honduras will have a government that understands the importance of foreign investment and the dangers of interfering with legitimate business operations. The port facilities will be secure, the shipping lanes will be protected, and our clients will be able to operate without worrying about political interference." William forced himself to nod like this all made sense, like he was impressed by the scope and cleverness of the operation. Inside, he felt like he was watching the birth of something monstrous, a new form of imperialism dressed in corporate clothing. "What's my specific role in the coordination?" he asked. "Communication hub," Carrera replied. "Our field teams need someone stateside who can coordinate with multiple agencies and departments without raising flags. Someone who can arrange equipment deliveries, personnel transfers, financial authorizations, all the logistical support that makes operations like this possible." "What kind of agencies?" Lewis and Carrera exchanged glances, and William saw something pass between them that made his blood run cold. "The kind that prefer not to be named in reports," Lewis said carefully. Let's just say that our operations have friends in various government departments who understand the strategic value of what we're accomplishing. William felt the world tilt around him. Not only was Lewis running illegal military operations, he was doing it with the knowledge and possibly the support of people within the U.S. government. The corruption ran deeper than Director Chun had indicated, reaching into the very agencies that were supposed to prevent this kind of activity. I think that's enough for today, Lewis said, beginning to gather up the maps and documents. Vincent, you'll be in town for the rest of the week. I want you and William to spend some time going over operational details and communication protocols. Carrera stood up, extending his hand to William again. Looking forward to working with you, Hayes. Just remember, what we do requires absolute loyalty and complete discretion. People who can't handle those requirements tend to have short careers. The threat was delivered with a smile, but William heard it clearly. He shook Carrera's hand and smiled back, playing the role of loyal employee, even as he planned the man's destruction. After Carrera left, Lewis walked around his desk and put a hand on William's shoulder. The gesture felt paternal, the way it had 15 years ago when Lewis had first taken him under his wing. I know this is a lot to absorb, William. The scope of what we're building, the implications for the future. But I want you to understand that you're part of something historic. We're not just changing business practices. We're changing the world. William looked into Lewis's eyes and saw the sincere conviction of someone who truly believed he was saving civilization by destroying democracy. It was perhaps the most terrifying thing he had encountered in a day full of revelations about murder and corruption and the casual way good people could convince themselves that evil was necessary. I understand, William said, and for the first time in 24 hours, he was telling the complete truth. He understood exactly what Lewis Blackstone was building. He understood exactly what needed to be done to stop it. And he understood exactly what it was going to cost him to do what needed to be done. The recording device seemed to pulse against his chest as he left Lewis's office, heavy with evidence that could destroy an empire built on blood and justified by the kind of logic that turned decent people into monsters. William walked past Collins without making eye contact, feeling the weight of the man's surveillance like a physical presence. 3 weeks. That's how long he had to gather enough evidence to stop an operation that would reshape a country and possibly change the way power worked in a modern world. 3 weeks to decide whether he was going to save his soul or lose his life trying. 2 weeks later, William sat in his apartment at 3 a.m, surrounded by evidence that could topple governments and destroy lives. The recording device had captured hours of conversations that detailed murder, corruption, and plans to destabilize an entire nation. But as the Honduras operation's launch date approached, William realized that evidence might not be enough. His phone buzzed with a secure message from Director Chun. Package received. Impressive work. However, we need more than recordings. We need documentation of the financial structure and proof of government collusion. Time is running short. William stared at the message, feeling the weight of impossible expectations. In 2 weeks of careful surveillance, he had documented enough crimes to put Lewis Blackstone away for multiple lifetimes. But the federal agents wanted more. They wanted the complete picture, the full network of corruption that stretched from corporate boardrooms to government offices. The problem was that getting that information would require accessing Lewis's private files, the ones he kept in the safe behind his desk. And accessing those files would mean betraying his cover in a way that would almost certainly result in his death. William's laptop chimed with an encrypted email from an address he didn't recognize. When he opened it, his blood ran cold. Mr. Hayes, my name is Marcus Delaney, and if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I programmed this email to send automatically if I don't check in every 24 hours. There are things you need to know about the Honduras operation, things that even Lewis doesn't fully understand. Meet me at Pier 47 at dawn. Come alone and watch your back. They're onto us. William checked the timestamp on the email. It had been sent 6 hours ago. Dawn was in 3 hours, and Marcus had been missing for 2 days. William dressed quickly, choosing clothes that would allow him to move fast if necessary. He tucked a pistol into his jacket, though he knew that if things went wrong, one gun wouldn't be enough against the kind of people Lewis employed. The drive to the waterfront took 45 minutes through empty streets that seemed to watch him pass. William found himself checking his mirrors constantly, looking for the black sedans and government plates that had become part of his daily paranoia. Pier 47 was a commercial fishing dock, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions about unusual meetings. William parked and walked out onto the pier, his footsteps echoing off the wooden planks. The harbor was shrouded in fog, making the world feel smaller and more dangerous than usual. A figure emerged from the shadows near the end of the pier. It was Marcus, but he looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His face was drawn, his eyes constantly moving, scanning for threats that might materialize from any direction. "You came," Marcus said as William approached. "Your email said you were in trouble. We're all in trouble. Lewis's operation is bigger than we thought, and it's happening faster than anyone realized." Marcus pulled a waterproof envelope from his jacket. "I've been doing some digging since our last meeting. What I found makes the documents I gave you look like a children's book." William opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, financial records, and what looked like military operational orders. But these weren't just about Honduras. They showed similar operations planned for 3 other Central American countries, all scheduled to launch within the next 6 months. Jesus Christ, William Vispirid. It gets worse. The Honduras operation isn't just about installing a friendly government. It's a test run for something much bigger. Lewis is building a network of controlled states, countries whose governments will be entirely dependent on his continued support. William flipped through the documents, feeling sick as the scope of Lewis's ambitions became clear. This wasn't just corporate imperialism. This was the systematic destruction of democracy in an entire region, replacing sovereign governments with puppet regimes controlled by American corporations. "How did you get these?" Marcus's expression grew grim. "From a friend who works in Vincent Carrera's organization. Someone who's having second thoughts about what they signed up for. Someone who doesn't want to be part of mass murder." Mass murder? The operational plan for Honduras includes something called Phase 3 population management. Elimination of political opposition, targeted killings of journalists and activists, disappearance of anyone who might organize resistance. They're not just planning to change the government. They're planning to terrorize the population into permanent submission. William felt the piers sway beneath his feet, though he knew it was his own sense of reality that was shifting. The recording device had captured conversations about dealing with local resistance, but he had assumed that meant bribery or intimidation. He hadn't imagined that Lewis was planning systematic genocide. "Why are you showing me this instead of taking it to the authorities yourself?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Because the authorities are part of the problem. My friend in Carrera's organization has identified government officials who are actively supporting the Honduras operation. CIA, State Department, even some people in the Pentagon. This isn't some rogue corporate operation. This has official backing at the highest levels." William thought about Director Chun and Agent Morrison, about their professional competence and their convincing story about protecting American interests. Were they really trying to stop Lewis's operation, or were they part of some larger game he couldn't understand? Who can we trust? Nobody in government. Nobody in corporate America. Maybe some journalists, if we can find ones who aren't owned by the same people who own Lewis. Marcus looked out at the harbor, where the first light of dawn was beginning to burn through the fog. "There's something else. My friend thinks there's going to be a security purge before the operation launches. Anyone who might pose a threat, anyone who's asked inconvenient questions. People like us. People exactly like us. Vincent Carrera has a list, and our names are on it." William felt the world crystallize around him with sudden clarity. He had been so focused on gathering evidence and building a case that he had forgotten the most basic rule of undercover work. The longer you stay in character, the more likely you are to be discovered and killed. How long do we have? Hours, maybe days. My friend wasn't sure of the timeline, just that it's happening soon. William made a decision that surprised him with its simplicity. For weeks, he had been trying to navigate between competing loyalties and uncertain allegiances. Now, with death approaching and mass murder on the horizon, the choice became clear. We have to stop the operation ourselves. Marcus studied his face in the growing light. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that if the government won't stop Lewis because they're part of it, and if the media won't stop him because they're owned by people like him, then we have to find another way. William pulled out his phone and showed Marcus the encrypted communication app Director Chun had given him. I've been working with federal agents who claim they want to stop Lewis, but maybe they're just trying to control the investigation. Maybe they're more interested in managing the situation than ending it. So what do we do? William looked out at the harbor, where fishing boats were beginning their morning runs. Ordinary people doing ordinary work, unaware that their government was supporting operations that would destroy democracy and murder innocents for corporate profit. We blow it all up. Not literally, but close. We take everything we know, everything we've documented, and we make it impossible to ignore or suppress. How? By going public. Every major news outlet, every investigative journalist, every foreign government that might have an interest in stopping American corporate imperialism. We flood the zone with information until it becomes impossible to contain. Marcus nodded slowly. It's a death sentence for both of us. Lewis won't let something like that go unpunished. Maybe, but at least we'll die knowing we try to stop something truly evil. They spent the next hour planning their approach. Marcus would reach out to his contacts in the international press, people who weren't beholden to American corporate interests. William would compile all his recordings and evidence into packages that could be distributed simultaneously to multiple outlets. As the sun rose higher, burning away the fog and revealing the harbor in sharp detail, William felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks, a sense of purpose that wasn't corrupted by competing loyalties or uncertain motivations. There's something else I need to tell you, Marcus said as they prepared to leave. About Lewis. About why he's really doing this. I thought it was about money and power. That's part of it. But my friend in Carrera's organization overheard something that changes everything. Lewis is dying. William felt the information hit him like a physical blow. What? Cancer. Advanced stage, maybe 6 months left. That's why the timeline has accelerated. Why everything is happening so fast. He's trying to build his empire before he dies, trying to leave a legacy that will reshape the world. The revelation recontextualized everything William thought he knew about Lewis's motivations. This wasn't just corporate greed or even ideological conviction. This was the desperate act of a dying man who wanted to be remembered as someone who changed history. Does anyone else know? Not many. Just his personal physician and maybe Vincent Carrera? Lewis is keeping it quiet because he knows that if his condition became public, it would destabilize everything he's built. William thought about the man who had been his mentor for 15 years, the person who had shaped his career and his understanding of how the world worked. Learning that Lewis was dying didn't excuse what he was doing, but it explained the desperate urgency behind operations that seemed recklessly aggressive. It doesn't change anything, William said finally. Dying doesn't give someone the right to commit genocide. No, it doesn't. But it means we're not just fighting a corporate empire. We're fighting the final gambit of a man who has nothing left to lose. They parted ways at the pier, Marcus heading to make contact with his international sources, while William returned to his apartment to compile the evidence that would either save a country or get them both killed. The drive back through the city gave William time to think about the path that had led him to this moment. 3 weeks ago, he had been a loyal employee who believed he was working for the good guys. Now he was planning to destroy everything he had spent 15 years building, knowing that success would probably mean his death. But as he thought about the operational plans Marcus had shown him, about the Phase 3 population management that would terrorize an entire nation into submission, William realized that some choices were simpler than they appeared. He could spend his remaining time alive as someone who had tried to stop mass murder, or he could live longer as someone who had enabled it through silence and inaction. When the choice was framed that way, it wasn't really a choice at all. William parked outside his apartment building and sat in his car for a moment, looking up at the windows of his home. After today, he would probably never see this place again. After today, he would either be dead or living the rest of his life as a fugitive from the kind of people who had unlimited resources and no moral constraints. But at least he would be living as someone who had chosen justice over safety, someone who had remembered that some things were worth dying for. William got out of his car and walked toward the building, feeling the weight of the recording device in his pocket and the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had work to do, evidence to compile, and a world to try to save before the men who owned it decided that his conscience had become too dangerous to tolerate. The morning sun was bright and clear, promising a day of crisp winter beauty. It seemed like a good day to burn down an empire built on blood and lies. It seemed like a good day to remind the world that ordinary people could still choose extraordinary courage when everything else failed. William Hayes walked into his building for what he knew might be the last time, ready to discover whether one man with a recording device and a functioning conscience could stand against the kind of power that had convinced itself it owned a future. The answer he was about to learn would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of everyone who believed that democracy was worth preserving and that some prices were too high to pay for corporate profit. Time was running out, but for the first time in weeks, William felt like he was running toward something worth reaching, even if he didn't survive the journey.